They stepped onto a cornfield-themed television set every week wearing matching outfits, matching haircuts, and matching grins. And for nearly 2 decades, they were two of the most recognizable faces in American country entertainment. Jim and Jon Hager were not just twins who happened to perform together. They were a single-act built from two bodies, a comedy and music duo so perfectly synchronized that audiences sometimes forgot they were watching two separate men at all. But behind the identical smiles of Hee Haw was a much longer, much more human story. One of hard beginnings, hard-won fame, quiet struggle, and ending that still stops people in their tracks decades later. So what really happened to the Hager twins once the cameras stopped rolling? Let's go back to the beginning. James Henry Hager and John William Hager were born on August 30th, 1941, in Chicago, Illinois. As infants, they were adopted by Jack Hager, a Methodist minister, and his wife Frances, a schoolteacher. It was a household built on faith, discipline, and music, and the twins found their first stage in the most ordinary of places, the church choir. From there, their voices carried them to a local Chicago television opportunity, where as teenagers they appeared on a Saturday morning program aimed at younger viewers on WGN-TV. The family eventually settled in Park Ridge, Illinois, where Jim and Jon attended Maine Township High School, graduating with a class of 1959. The same school, just a year behind actor Harrison Ford, and a few years ahead of young Hillary Rodham. Even then, classmates and teachers reportedly had trouble telling the two brothers apart. They dressed alike by choice more often than not, finished each other's sentences, and shared an easy rapport that made them a package deal in almost every sense. After high school, both brothers enlisted in the United States Army, where they continued performing, playing music for officers' clubs and non-commissioned officers' clubs both stateside and across Europe. It's worth pausing on that detail, because it's easy to picture two future television stars, as though fame simply found them. It didn't. Long before Hollywood or Nashville ever knew their names, Jim and Jon were two young, enlisted men hauling guitars into mess halls and rec rooms, learning how to hold a room's attention with nothing but harmony and timing. That kind of grinding, unglamorous stage time is often where real performers are made, and by most accounts, it's exactly where the Hagers sharpened the instincts that would later define their television careers. Military service gave them discipline and stage experience in equal measure, and by the time their service ended, they had a clear idea of where they wanted their lives to go next, California, and a career in entertainment. It was a leap of faith for two brothers with no industry connections, no guaranteed income, and nothing but shared last name and a shared sense of rhythm to fall back on. The move west was not glamorous. Jim and Jon landed work as backup performers at Ledbetter's, a Los Angeles nightclub known for showcasing rising talent. The lineup of performers who passed through that stage during the same era reads like a who's who of future stars. The Carpenters, John Denver, Kenny Rogers, and Steve Martin among them. The Hager brothers weren't headliners yet. They were the reliable, hard-working harmony singers filling out someone else's show. Their actual breakthrough came from an unlikely venue, Disneyland. While performing there, the twins caught the attention of Buck Owens, one of the biggest names in country music at the time. Owens saw something marketable in the identical brothers, a wholesome, easy charm paired with real musical talent, and signed them. They began opening for country acts like Lefty Frizzell, Tex Ritter, Wynn Stewart, and Billy Joe Spears, steadily building a name for themselves on the circuit. In 1969, the twins signed a recording contract with Capitol Records and released Gotta Get to Oklahoma, 'Cause California's Getting Me, which climbed the country charts and gave them their first real taste of national recognition. Over the years that followed, they would go on to record 7 albums across 4 different labels, Capitol, Electra Asylum, Barnaby, and Bookshop, along with recordings of songs like Merle Haggard's Silver Wings, which appeared as the B-side of Haggard's own hit Workin' Man Blues. For two brothers who had spent years playing backup for other people's acts, watching their own name climb the charts must have felt like validation of everything the previous decade of hustling had been for. They were no longer the identical harmony singers filling out somebody else's set list. They were recording artists in their own right, with a label behind them and a growing fan base that wanted to hear what they had to say, even if what made them famous, in the end, wouldn't be the records at all. But it was television, not radio, that would define their careers. That same year, CBS greenlit a new country-flavored sketch comedy and variety show meant to give Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In a run for its money. The show was Hee Haw, and Buck Owens was tapped as one of its two hosts. When producers asked him to recommend fresh talent for the new series, he didn't hesitate. He brought in Jim and Jon Hager. From 1969 through 1986, the Hager Twins were fixtures of Hee Haw. They performed music, took part in the show's rapid-fire cornfield sketches, and quickly became known simply as the Hagers, two blonde, identical, easy-going brothers who would sing a heartfelt ballad one moment and deliver a corny punchline the next. Producer Sam Lovello later remembered them fondly, noting that they filled a role the show badly needed. Attractive, talented male performers who balanced out the show's roster of Hee Haw honeys. Audiences responded instantly. Fan mail poured in. In 1973, the brothers even appeared in the pages of Playgo magazine, a testament to just how far their appeal had spread beyond the country music audience. Their time on the show wasn't limited to Hee Haw either. The twins branched into other television work, appearing on The Bionic Woman in 1976, memorably cast as clone soldiers from another planet, as well as the TV movie Twin Detectives alongside screen legend Lillian Gish, and guest spots on shows like Country Kitchen. It was a rare kind of career. Two identical brothers who had turned their shared identity into a genuine creative asset rather than a gimmick that would fade. Still, life inside a long-running variety show was demanding. Filming schedules were grueling, and the format left little room for the kind of personal songwriting or creative experimentation the twins sometimes wanted to pursue. People laughed at themselves, Jim told the Associated Press in a 1988 interview, reflecting on the show's chemistry and fast pace, acknowledging that not every joke landed as gold. It was an honest, understated assessment from a man who spent nearly 2 decades inside one of television's most beloved ensembles. It's easy, looking back from today, to assume that kind of schedule must have worn on the way it's worn on countless other performers who spent years inside a single, tightly formatted show. Long-running variety programs like Hee Haw ran on repetition by design. The same cornfield set, the same rhythm of joke, song, sketch, song, joke, week after week, season after season. For performers with real musical ambitions, that formula can start to feel less like a stage and more like a routine. What set the Hagers apart, by most accounts from people who worked alongside them, was that they never let the grind show. Whatever frustrations came with 17 years of the same format, they kept showing up, kept delivering, and kept the audience's affection intact right up until their run as regular cast members ended. When the Hagers' regular run on Hee Haw wound down in 1986, with the show itself continuing in syndication until 1993, the brothers didn't disappear from public life. They kept performing together for years afterward, taking their music and comedy to fairs, charity events, and reunion shows across the country. Both men were known for their steady involvement in charitable work in Nashville, where they eventually settled. According to those who worked alongside them, the Hagers didn't treat these appearances as afterthoughts or nostalgic cash-ins. They showed up because they genuinely wanted to help, frequently donating their time to fundraisers and events supporting sick children. By the late 1980s, the twins had told interviewers that in their entire lives, they had spent apart only about 3.5 years, a stretch when Jon relocated to Nashville while Jim remained in California, before Jim eventually followed him east. It's a detail that says a great deal about how tightly bound their lives were, on camera and off. Two men, born the same day, adopted into the same family, building the same career, living in each other's orbit for the better part of 6 decades. Away from the stage, their personal lives were more private than their public image suggested, but they weren't invisible. Jon Hager married Catherine Akersloot, and the couple had a daughter, Jessica. Jon also had another daughter, Mandy, and would later be remembered as a devoted father and, eventually, a grandfather to several granddaughters. It was a quieter, more grounded side of man best known to millions as one half of a matching comedy act. Proof that even performers built around a shared public image could carve out distinct, individual family lives when the cameras were off. That detail matters, because it complicates the easy narrative that sometimes gets told about the Hagers. The idea that they were simply two carefree bachelor entertainers who never put down roots outside of their act. Jon's obituary tells a fuller story. A father, later a grandfather, survived by daughters on opposite coasts and grandchildren who knew him as more than a face from Saturday night television. Fame gave the Hager twins a shared, public identity built on sameness. But off camera, their lives had begun to branch in ordinary, human ways, careers, families, and individual routines that existed quietly alongside the act the world knew them for. By the mid-2000s, the Hager twins were still performing occasionally, though their audiences were smaller and more nostalgic than the millions who had once tuned in weekly. Time had done what it does to every performer. The golden hair had gone gray, the pace had slowed, and the spotlight that once followed them everywhere had dimmed considerably. Then, on May 1st, 2008, tragedy struck. Jim Hager collapsed in the parking lot of a Nashville coffee shop. He was rushed to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead of an apparent heart attack. He was 66 years old. The country music world mourned quickly and publicly. Hee Haw castmate Lulu Roman called Jim a delightful, funny, loyal friend in comments to the Associated Press, adding that he and Jon had been a dynamic and extremely talented duo whose loss would be felt deeply. For Jon, the loss was devastating in a way that went beyond ordinary grief. For the first time in 66 years, he was not part of a pair. Friends and former colleagues, including longtime Hee Haw producer Sam Lovolo, said Jon's health declined sharply in the months following his brother's death, and that he had fallen into a deep depression he never fully climbed out of. He withdrew from public appearances and largely stayed close to home in Nashville. Then, on January 9, 2009, just 8 months after burying his twin brother, Jon Hager was found dead in his sleep at his Nashville home. He was 67. There was no dramatic warning, no single diagnosis that explained it. Those who knew him best simply believed that losing Jim had been more than he could carry. As his obituary gently put it, he had gone to again be with his twin brother. The brothers' ashes were later buried side by side at the Middle Tennessee Veterans Cemetery, a fittingly permanent way to mark a bond that had never truly been broken, even by fame, distance, or time. Grief researchers and those who study the experience of twins have long noted how uniquely devastating the loss of an identical twin can be. Writers who cover bereavement have pointed to the Hager story specifically as an example of what's sometimes called twinless twin grief, a phenomenon in which surviving twins describe feeling as though a part of their own identity has been severed, not just a loved one lost. Whether or not that fully explains what happened to Jon in those final 8 months, it's a pattern that shows up again and again in the accounts of people who understood what the twin bond really meant to him. Sam Lovolo, who had produced Hee Haw for an entire run and remained close with both brothers for decades afterward, described their relationship almost as though the two men shared a single personality rather than two separate ones. That description helps explain why so many people who knew the Hagers weren't shocked, in a strange way, when Jon's health failed so soon after Jim's death. They had never really operated as two independent people, even off stage. They had spent all but roughly 3.5 years of their entire lives within reach of one another, performing together, living in the same cities, working the same rooms, building the same catalog of songs and jokes. When that lifelong proximity was broken, those closest to Jon say he simply didn't have a template for moving forward alone. It would be easy to remember Jim and Jon Hager only as a novelty act. Two identical blonde brothers in matching outfits who happened to catch a producer's eye at the right moment. But that undersells what they actually built. They were working musicians long before Hee Haw made them famous, backing up some of the biggest names in American music at a scrappy Los Angeles nightclub. They were Capitol Records recording artists with a genuine chart history. They were television performers with range enough to move between country comedy, science fiction, and network drama. And for 17 years, they were two of the most insistent, well-liked faces on one of the most watched shows in America. More than that, they were, by every account from the people who actually knew them, kind, fundraisers for sick children, decades of quiet charity work in Nashville, a friend group that spoke about them not with a detached fondness reserved for former celebrities, but with the raw, specific grief usually reserved for people who mattered personally. That's a harder thing to fake than stage chemistry. Consider, too, just how unusual their career actually was within the entertainment industry. Twin acts are common enough as a novelty, a gimmick that gets an audience's attention for a season or two before fading. The Hagers weren't a novelty. They held a regular seat on a top-rated network show for 17 consecutive years, recorded original material across 4 record labels, and picked up guest roles on major series outside of country music entertainment entirely. That's not the resume of 2 men who got lucky once. That's the resume of 2 working performers who kept earning their place, year after year, in an industry that rarely gives anyone, let alone a novelty act, that kind of longevity. In the end, the story of the Hager Twins isn't really a story about show business at all. It's a story about a bond that started before either of them could speak and never loosened, not through fame, not through decades performing under bright lights, not through the ordinary pressures that pull most partnerships apart. When Jim Hager died in the spring of 2008, something in his brother went with him. 8 months later, Jon followed. 2 men who entered the world together on the same day, in the same family, left it together too, not at the same moment, but close enough that almost no one who followed their story was surprised. Millions of viewers spent Saturday nights in the 1970s and 80s laughing at 2 identical brothers trading jokes in a cornfield. Few of them knew the full arc of what came before that stage, or what would come after it. But maybe that's exactly what made the Hager Twins so easy to love in the first place. 2 men who never stopped being first and always brothers. What do you think the Hager Twins deserve to be remembered for most? Their music, their comedy, or the bond between them that outlasted fame itself? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of the stars you thought you knew.